So what's going on, YouTube? This is Doug Jenkins. I wanted you to see my ceiling up here. If you search around, the whole ceiling is blanketed with 1 inch, and then into those corners there you see these All-Rex bass traps. That's really good down to about 100 hertz, maybe 120 hertz. But the key is that I'm going to show you here, and I'm going to go around the room, and I'm going to get into components, not just acoustics. I'm going to get into equipment, because I found out at the end of the day, people want to hear about that stuff. They want to hear about what's going to benefit their recordings. But honestly, if you get to the point where you know just enough to be smart about it and go, well, this guy could do it for me. I got a lot of guys that do that. I teach them and they learn, and even they buy high-end equipment, but then they're like, yeah, I got the recording, but the mixing is a different process. And I'll go into a little bit of what mixing is, and I'll go into what mastering is. And honestly, that's a totally different thing than just buying the equipment. But I'm going to get into this. And if you don't have this stuff, it's almost like the necessities. It is the necessities to turn out great music. Now, on an independent budget, people, I want to fill you in on this. This is not to demean you or degrade you or disqualify you. It's just the fact that a lot of guys are just starting out. And then there's people that have been doing it for years that send music to me. And then there's industry people that send music to me. So here's the deal. You have, the first thing is this. If you look around this room, I'm going to put some flash on this. You probably can't even see it because it's so darn dark. But these are mammoth bass traps, by the way, all the way up that wall, all the way into the corner. Bass and corners don't like each other for some reason. They actually get along real well, and they sit in the corners. And what happens is they build up in those corners, and then they ruin the image for everything else in the room. Now, I know this is going to be really, really hard to see, and it's very dark in the corners. But as you can see here, these are 2-inch Owens Corning 703 panels at first reflection points on the monitors. Those make a drastic difference. That's one of those Sonolight panels that we put at that angle because we were finding that it was, it was affected in the 600 hertz range, and it was actually bouncing there for a little bit. Now, I've got to the point where I can actually hear this in the room. But seeing that this camera is not really capturing this like I want it to, we're going to get into what I wanted to talk about anyways. We have over 20 bass traps in this room. We have, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Owens Corning 703 2-inch, 2 Owens Corning 703 4-inch, and 2 Sonolight panels, and we've pretty much covered the entire ceiling, which highs like to reflect up there and really screw up the image of the song and the highs, and you really can't hear if you're trying to DS or whatnot. So the image in the room with the speakers, I'm going to show you the speakers here. The image in the room is ridiculously good, and I'm going to tell you what gets that image and what makes me able to do my job to the best of my ability. So if you look at the speakers, first of all, everybody knows these white cone speakers. These are NS10s. I like these because I call these the dull speakers, the dumb speakers. They're not dumb, they're actually really fantastic, but they are so flat in their response that honestly, if you can make it sound good on those, you can make it sound good on anything. But are they a mastering speaker? No. Are they a great mixing speaker? Absolutely. And what's the difference in that? Well, think about it this way. If it's that flat, there is no bass response in these things at all. The bass, if you can get the bass to sound good on these, you are doing very well. If you have the bass up too much and the dynamics are off a little bit, it's going to tell you, hey, the bass is a little crappy. But the problem is that the roll-off frequencies on this are like not into the low lows of a song. So therefore, you can't even hear if you need to roll off certain frequencies that are taking up space between the speakers. They're awesome for mixing, don't get me wrong. But here's our mastering size speaker. This is the LSR 6328 from JBL. This is like a bigger image of an NS10. It's sort of funny. It's a better sounding NS10. I sound, if I A/B back and forth for my NS10s, if I'm mastering a song on these and say I just want to hear it on the NS10 real quick, or mixing a song, and I go over to these, I have these sounding better than if I was mixing on them. So in turn, if I was going to buy some speakers and spend a lot of money, these ones go for around $3,200, and these ones go for around, you can probably get them on eBay for $600. So What's this have to do with anything? I got a little bit of a cold. You guys are going to have to bear with me. But I'm trying to go around the studio because I got a little bit of work. I got to open up a Pro Tools session tonight. So I'm just going to get into some gear. It's iced tea, dude. Chill out. People are like, yeah, we don't drink in the studio, man. Can't do that. You can drink in the recording studio, but not in the mixing studio. Here's the deal. Here's the first rack. This is the third piece of the puzzle. You have acoustics, you have awesome monitors, and you have awesome converters. That equals awesome records. It really does. When we're talking about digital, this is pretty much what dictates your sound quality, and therefore you got to pull out the stops. If you're a mixing engineer, you should have some of the better converters on the market. There's two types, or two leagues, I would call it. You have the professional league of converters like the Symphony IO, Lynx, Lucid, Mytek, Benchmark, Prism, the Pro Tools HD line. The reason it's HD is because of that interface, and also the way it works with your computer, with the PCI cards and the processor cards. But HD native is just a way to connect your Symphony IO to an HD Pro Tools. So you really can just go Pro Tools, and sorry Pro Tools, but you can go like Pro Tools 9, just basic, and you can get something like the Symphony IO, and it's going to be either better or about the same as going out and buying an HD Omni interface or one of the older HD 192 interfaces. The sound quality in Pro Tools at that time is better because of the interface. It's the way that your music's running in and out of your computer. So remember that. That's something really important for you. But we're going to get into the two converters I have. In my studio, most of the times when I'm mixing, I might have a session where I'm running all kinds of hardware and whatnot, but I have the Rosetta 800, which is 8 in, 8 out, and I have one card in the Symphony IO that's 8 in, 8 out, and it's ADAT. Now these cards, ADAT, fiber optic, that red light kind of deal, fiber optic cable, that carries 8 channels of audio. I have a card in the back of my computer that runs, and I don't want to get it all, behind the desk and all that junk, but it runs ADAT, and I have a PCI card from RME called an RME 9652 card. And what it allows me to do is run both of these in the same system. So I got best of both worlds there, and I have an RME 9652 card that's an ADAT PCI card. So this carries audio through an ADAT cable. Both of them do. The next thing is, let me say this real quick. The Apogee Rosetta is an AD-DA converter. It's an analog to digital and a digital to analog. What does that mean to the newbies out there? Every interface you own, like an MBox or a Duet or a Scarlett or a Presonus, the smaller ones that they have, or a Profire 610, or all those are AD-DA converters. But they also have a way to interface with your computer. With the Rosetta, I would not be able to hook it up to my computer without the RME 9652 card. You need an external card, or back in the day, you can buy an old school ADAT interface and bypass the interface by running this as your main inputs and outputs in your Pro Tools session. The questions are going to be flying on this one. The Symphony IO, on the other hand, is an all-in-one solution. It has Pro Tools HD mode, so you can just connect it right to an HD rig. It has USB mode, so you can hook it up to your Mac USB. It has standalone mode, so you can just have it in basic standalone mode. And then, I'm trying to think of the other freaking one. Oh, the Symphony card. So if you have a Symphony card, PCI card, you can hook it up Symphony. So there's Symphony, there's Pro Tools HD, there's USB, which most of you guys would use if you're just going to go all out and you don't have any of the other stuff. And then there is standalone mode, which I'm using with the RME 9652 card. So let's get to some gear. This is the DBX 160As that are in the rack. A lot of guys ask me about these. Should I buy one of these? I would highly recommend learning a little bit more about getting the converters before you go out and spend money on these, because honestly, it's not a really smart investment unless you have this in your studio. Because one thing that I don't want you guys to do if you're going to send me music is use the compressors before you hit the converter. What do I mean by that? I don't want, if you're going to work with me, I don't want to teach you on YouTube to hook up a mic preamp and then run the preamp signal into that compressor, and then out of that compressor into your line input. On another video I just did, I show you how to connect hardware inserts so you can use that later on in Pro Tools. Questions are going to be flying on that one too. But let's keep going. So the DBX 160As are infamous compressors on bass, kick drums, drum buses, backup vocals, samples. They're very, very handy compressors that I've used. So most studios you'll see have a pair of these in them because they just sound good, and they're not the most expensive. I think I got both these for around 700 and something bucks. But so if that's like your first set of compressors, go for it. You can probably find them on eBay for 200 and something bucks a piece, but they're well worth the money. I think the best sounding compressor for the money, hands down. This piece of equipment is a Digimax FS 8-channel Class A mic preamp, 96K ADAT I/O, direct analog output. I have never hooked it up. This was from a buddy. He wants me to demo it. Sometimes people say, hey, I'd like you to borrow this and listen to it. That's a pretty cool thing. So I just haven't had the chance, but it's a digital way to add 8 more mic inputs to your interface. So if you had like a 002 or a 003 at home and you need 8 more mic channels, this is a Digimax FS. So that is, in sense, an AD converter in itself, and it allows you, it's got a DA converter, digital audio output. So to each his own. That's Digimax by Personas. I don't know too much more about it, but I will keep you posted if I get froggy and want to hook it up. This is an an aural exciter affix, excuse me. Why are they going to make that name, dude? I can hardly pronounce that. This is called the Big Bottom. The reason I got this was because it was on sale. I would not recommend this piece like as your main piece, and you say you're master of music and you got one of these. This is not a mastering piece. This is more of a mixing piece. If we're having a trouble getting the low end to sit right, maybe the bass needs to be bigger. This is like a save all in some hip hop songs. There is the girth button. What we can do is add harmonics to the low end frequencies, therefore it's not turning up or taking away headroom, it's just turning up frequencies in the bass or in the highs. And you can see this on a lot of DJ rigs where they find the BBE Sonic Maximizer and stuff like that to make your speakers sound better. This can become useful in the mix, but honestly, that's not hooked up right now and it's covering up wires. I'm an honest person. These are definitely hooked up. These are the solid state alpha channels. I use these so much because of that EQ right there. I don't use it for the preamps. I bought them for the EQ. To get 3 bands of EQ, a low filter, high filter, and a mid filter, solid state with their name on it, it sounds punchy, clean, transparent, and honestly, to this day, I still cannot make that happen with a plugin. I've used the SSL plugins, but for some reason running it into these boxes and hip-hop are like, they go together. I don't use it on vocals a lot. I use it pretty much for the EQ, mostly when I get mixtape tracks. Let me flip this back around real quick, but if I get a mixtape track, and we do a lot of this stuff where you got an instrumental that's on 2 tracks, and then you have a vocal on the other track, and I'll show you some of the stuff I'll use on the vocals. It comes out and it sounds amazing. The other thing that you got to realize is even if I don't touch your music and run it through those symphony converters, it's going to sound better regardless. So a lot of people ask me that, like, wow, it sounds better. It just sounds better. And, even before I even mix it, just a lot of guys send me music producers just to bounce their sessions, like their FL sessions or their Reason sessions. And they sell them on the internet and they like their mix or whatever. So I'm like, yeah, if you want me to bounce it. And I do it for 10 bucks and they love it. There's one guy that says, yeah, I could go out and buy the symphonies and you can go price them on the internet. But instead of buying that and spending all that money, he just sends them over here and I'll do like a quick check on something and tell him, hey, dude, that's sticking out a little bit too much. So it's a pretty good service too. But let's get back into this. If I'm doing mixing, we have 2 patch bays up top. These are just, actually, they're cheaper patch bays, but they do exactly what they're meant to do. I wouldn't say they're cheap in quality. They're just not, it's a DBX PB48. And I know a lot of professional studios that just sort of slap those in there. And the reason is you got to buy the other equipment that costs thousands of dollars. But this is where all my outputs and inputs go, so I can route this studio anywhere I want it to be. that's what a patch bay does. It allows you to patch into certain things without having to take away from certain things. So if, like in this instance where all this junk is, we were doing certain routing for certain tracks. I don't want to get into the patch bay right now because you guys will, honestly, it gets confusing. But literally this allows me to patch any piece of equipment into any other piece of equipment. So I could go like into from the solid state out into the Digimax left and right channel for some stupid reason. I have no, you know, out of the Digimax into the DBX 168s for compression, out of the DBX 168s into Rosetta channels 1 and 2. If you had to do that every single day you had to do that and get behind the desk, you're gonna probably quit. So that's why they made patch bays. Other ways to hook up patch bays, you just gotta know the basic principles. Maybe I'll do a video on patch bays coming up here pretty shortly. But here is my monster rack. This is something that sets me apart in the mastering, and this is a professional mastering you're gonna get. And there's 3 pieces of main component pieces of equipment that I have, and I'm fortunate to have that I use in the mastering stage and in the mixing stage. So don't say just because I'm not mastering your stuff that I'm not gonna use it in the mix. But here is the killer rack, dude. This is the Manley Massive Passive EQ. You might have seen the plug-in version. This is not an app or a plug-in. This is actually a genuine mastering version, Massive Passive. I forked out some bucks for that. But the reason I did that is because, yes, it is better. Yes, the sound quality is better. Yes, the way it works with your audio is better. I mean, instantly putting on the input button, those 2 little knobs there, if you can see them. Sorry about the camera, guys. When I put that in, instantly the song becomes sounding cleaner, more defined, and it takes on, it doesn't take away from the musical, it adds to the musical. The creativity that you guys have, and if you're serious about capturing your music and selling it to the world, it should go through stuff like this, because honestly you cannot get this sound with inside a plugin. It just doesn't happen. I have not heard a plugin that can do this. Now, do not get me wrong. You can use plugins as a great mixing or mastering engineer and get awesome results based on your converters. But the Massive Passive is our main mastering EQ, and I'm glad that I have it. I thank God for it, because honestly, you really have to let your ears be the judge and send me something and go, wow. And then once you get that wow factor, then you'll know, oh, okay, this guy's got some high-end gear, and he also knows how to EQ it. I mean, you got to know how EQ is, and that's what I've spent like 13 years of my life learning, equalization and dynamics. I think that's what separates a lot of engineers, is the people that focus on the EQ, the dynamics, and all the time-based effects and all the things that they have, you know, all the tools they have at their disposal. That's what separates us. So the next thing is the dangerous BAX EQ, a very, very, very transparent EQ. What we mean by transparent is you could tweak the knobs quite a bit and still it's not making a drastic impact on your audio. This thing works with different shelves. If you're not familiar with shelving, what shelving is, if I have this shelf set to like 7.1 up here, and I turn these, which are the gain of that 7.1 shelf, everything over 7.1 is going to be shelved up. And then it works with the shelf with different curves. So these things were designed for mastering purposes. So let's say, you know, you bring a song in and it sounds awesome, and you don't want me to alter it at all, and you just want it louder. Sometimes when we turn stuff up, things start sticking out. So that's where the Massive Passive comes in, and it'll take care of that stuff in a way that you honestly have to hear it. And then we get up and we're really turning stuff up, and all of a sudden, you know, the shelf around, let's say 4K becomes very, very harsh. We can calm that down maybe a 0.5 of a decibel, and that's all we needed. So in the mastering stage, we're doing very subtle changes to make drastic differences in your recording. The next thing is the Manley Mu that's in the mastering stage. The mastering version of this I do not have, but the difference is the Denton knobs. I personally use a lot of metering in the DAW that I'm using in Pro Tools or Wavelab or whatnot, and I can match these channels to the original absolutely perfect but in the mastering version, it is step knobbed. This thing, I had to calibrate it the other day, so this kind of equipment, yeah, it needs some TLC, but when you get it back to factory calibration, it sounds fantastic. This is a compressor. This is a compressor that acts like a Fairchild compressor. It's able to do a lot of compression without it sounding like you're compressing anything. But if you notice, let me say something. One of the biggest keys in music is compression, and learning how to use compressors and understanding compressors. So the people that understand compression will understand why that piece of equipment right there is so important, and to have the highest end you can possibly have. That's like the desert tool that all the audio gear select guys say, oh, if I could have one tool, one compressor, it'd probably be the Manley Mu or another high-end compressor. Because what high-end compressors do that a lot of plugins have a tough time doing, they add a sense of realism as you turn it up. Like this dual input knob right here, that knob alone has saved probably 3,000 masters for people. And you know, I might be exaggerating, but at least 500 people that have sent their music, they're like, man, my vocals just need to kick up a little bit, and I wish they just had a little more power. Dude, I turned that knob to where it is right now, and say it was set flat, like say it was like right there, and I'm like, yeah, you just need a little bit more. Okay, cool. And all of a sudden the whole energy of the song changes and everybody's happy, and they've never heard that. That's how important this kind of equipment is. So you got to give a hand clap to Manley Labs on their stuff. It's ridiculous. This stuff ain't cheap, but having the Manley Mu, the BAX EQ, and then the massive passive, it's a killer mastering combo. So that's my mastering. iMixandMaster.com is the website. I do a lot of songs now, and I appreciate it. That's why I'm doing YouTube videos, because I want people to learn. And honestly, I can say this, and this will be the last thing. If you don't have this kind of stuff, you owe it to yourself. You really do. And I hate saying that because it sounds cliche, but it's true. You owe it to yourself if you have your music to a point where you're really happy with your creativity and the way you got your stuff structured, to send your stuff to somebody that actually understands how to use this and knows how to get to where you want to go with your music. Because it's about the engineer, the equipment, and the room, and the speakers, and it's the whole thing. I can't sit here and say, oh yeah, you get this, that's it, because I used to have this joke going on with my dad when I was growing up, where I'd buy a piece of equipment, and he was really budget concerned about my stuff for some reason when I grew up, because he wanted me to do well, and I'd go out and spend like $1,500 on a piece of equipment, and he'd be like, and then 2 weeks later I'd buy a piece of equipment for $400, and he goes, I'd be like, that's the last thing I need, everything I need. And we had this big joke going for a long time, because I'd always say, that's the last thing I need, that's the last thing I need. It never ends. So one last thing I'm going to show you for the mixing, and then I'm out. This is the Control 24. This is something I use with Pro Tools. In a mix, if we have the full-blown mix, which costs a little more money, but you'll have all them faders and maybe a bank over, which will have 48 faders. So when you hit the bank over, the 24 faders become the next 24 faders. The reason I have this, I'm gonna set the record straight, and I own it. This will not make your music sound better. This is not an interface. This is a control surface. It is a glorified mouse, but it is probably one of the best I can't, how do you say mice? Do you say mice? No, it's one of the better mouses on the market and it's an older unit. I mean, they got the newer one, but here's the deal. I get into a mix, I'm looking here the whole time. So I feel like I'm part of the song, and yes, I don't know if it's psychology or what. Maybe one of you psychology majors can tell me this, but your sense of, you're not looking up at Pro Tools all day, you're not up here, but you're right down here and you're listening to the music. And then the image between the speakers, where we have the speakers here, just becomes so much more apparent. Here's the deal with this thing. This is, do you need it in the studio? No. If I got rid of it, would I want it back? Yes. Once you've used something like this, it's hard to get used to going back. But there's a lot of times I find myself doing this. I'll go out and I'll find a plug-in with the mouse, because it's such a pain. It becomes a pain with the board. But doing stuff like automation, I found myself doing. So does it make better albums in the mix? It might, because I found myself doing more automations with sends, more automations with auxiliaries, more automations with pans, more automations with plugins, because of the rotary knobs, the faders, and just getting in and more creative. So maybe in a sense, using something like this as a controller, it allows you to get, for you analog dudes out there, it's absolutely a necessity, because it gets you back into what your comfort zone is, analog. But there's something about hardware and actually twisting knobs that's fun. So when your plugins become knobs, here's another cool trick, by the way, and then I'm going to get off this video, but I hope you guys learned something here. Here's the deal. If I go in and I go to insert and I go to flip, there's the flip knob. Say I open up an EQ. Now that EQ plugin will come across all these rotary knobs. All the settings on that EQ that I corresponded to a channel. So there's the channel. Here's channel 1. Say we have an EQ on channel 1. Did you see that? That's where you sign it. EQ, dynamics, and insert. So we got an EQ on there. We click the EQ button, and all of a sudden the EQ shows up here. We switch it active, and now all of a sudden across the whole entire board, I could have done this with it on, but I didn't feel like turning it on. Sorry. Now all these rotary knobs become all the settings on your favorite plugins. But now if I hit this flip button, bam, all of a sudden all the rotary knobs become the faders. Pretty sweet, huh? So every last fader becomes the settings for my plugins, dude. People get shocked by that, especially if they own Pro Tools and I'm mixing a song for them and they stop by in my area. I think that's one of those cool things, because then they're like, wait a second, is that the plugin? I'm like, yeah, dude, check it out. So there's a lot of cool features on this. The other thing is, it actually is its own monitoring station, like a Mackie Big Knob. That's pretty much all it is. The monitoring station, that's what a Mackie Big Knob does. It has a talkback feature on it. If you wanted to put it into a recording environment, it would work perfect for you. And they're going down in price. And then it has the biggest bonus that I want to bring a big argument to, is people are knocking these preamps. Focusrite put some killer preamps in there. They aren't no Vintech, or they're not, you know, they have their own unique sound, but they're probably, let's just put it this way, the preamp is the last of your concern if you're not getting decent recordings. I recorded a vocal tag for a hip-hop producer about a week ago, and he said it was the best he ever sounded, but I put his voice, so you guys understand this. Whoa. So you guys understand this, I ran his voice through like this, from the Focusrite pre into the Manley left channel in compression mode, over to the right channel in limiting mode. Then I went down to the BAX EQ, and I added a little bit of fatness in the 120 for his voice. I rolled off the highs and I rolled off the lows where they needed to be, and then I adjusted the 1K for a little bit of presence.